The Honourable Member for Beaches, East York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of Bill C-52, an act to amend the Canada Transportation Act and the Railway Safety Act. However, the bill, Mr. Speaker, is just returning to us from committee where we heard testimony from witnesses, representatives like the Safe Rail communities from the Toronto area, who share our party's view, the NDP's view, that although, and I quote, although it has some promising elements, Bill C-52 could go further to ensure safety and accountability, end quote. Opportunities were missed here, Mr. Speaker, but nevertheless I stand in support of the bill in light of the need for an immediate response to rail safety issues in Canada. As I've mentioned in the House before, Mr. Speaker, the growing frequency of train derailments since the disaster in Lac-Mégantic has led to many Conservative promises to rectify shortcomings with safety inspections and rail safety compliance measures. They have yet to honor that commitment, and this bill goes nowhere near, Mr. Speaker, what they need to do to honor those commitments. With 3 train derailments occurring in the span of a month last year, this is a pressing issue, and one that this government has been scrambling to catch up with and still have not caught up with. So far, Mr. Speaker, these accidents have occurred in rural areas, and as the critic for urban affairs, I would note, Mr. Speaker, that this bill would do little to alleviate costs associated and the human tragedy inevitably associated with a derailment in one of our big cities, one of our dense urban communities in this country. Mr. Speaker, starting with the Liberal government in 1999, successive Liberal and Conservative governments have let companies self-regulate and self-inspect their equipment and railway lines. This approach is clearly not working. The bill put forward by the Minister that we're discussing today, Mr. Speaker, is an effort to address some of the liability and accountability issues associated with rail safety. It proposes several necessary fixes, but it is just a start, Mr. Speaker. It appears to me that this is a government that is in no hurry, in fact, to catch up on the rail safety issue. We've heard the member today from across the aisle talking about the need for more study, Mr. Speaker, while communities across this country are anxious about dangerous goods being transported by rail quite literally through their backyards. This bill sets out to provide some compensation for victims of derailments after the fact, Mr. Speaker. It is as if, Mr. Speaker, this is a government that's accepted the inevitability of train derailments in this country. We not only need stronger laws, Mr. Speaker, but we need stronger enforcement of laws and regulations, and we need penalties on those who break them. It's clear to us and to experts such as the Transportation Safety Board that the government has very serious problems in terms of oversight, inspections, and audits. Nevertheless, the proposed changes in this bill remain necessary and while not fully adequate or nearly adequate, have the support of this side of the House. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-52 sets out to do 3 main things. It requires minimum insurance levels for railways transporting dangerous goods. It establishes a disaster relief fund paid for by crude oil shippers to compensate victims of derailment, provinces and municipalities as well, and it gives more authority to the Minister and Cabinet and railway safety inspectors. With respect to minimum insurance levels, the bill provides for a legislated minimum insurance coverage of $25 million for railway companies transporting minimal quantities of dangerous goods, up to a maximum of $1 billion for railways transporting substantial quantities of dangerous goods. Railway companies, Mr. Speaker, will be liable for losses, damages, costs, and expenses resulting from a railway accident involving crude oil or other designated goods up to the level of the company's minimum liability insurance coverage. Based on the costs of train derailments like that in Lac-Mégantic, these measures appear to be justified, Mr. Speaker. After that disaster, the Montreal Main and Atlantic Railway exhausted its insurance coverage of only $25 million and went bankrupt, yet damages paid by taxpayers with respect to that derailment have been to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. The Quebec government, Mr. Speaker, has estimated that the total cost will be well over $400 million. On the disaster relief fund, the second thing this bill sets out to do is establish a pooled relief fund to be made available if the minimum insurance levels are insufficient or exceeded. While this is a step forward, there are outstanding concerns that this indeed also may not be sufficient in the event of another major disaster, particularly, Mr. Speaker, in an urban area. When it comes to disaster relief, the first responders on the scene will inevitably be firefighters and sometimes, Mr. Speaker, police. And for that reason, the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs had asked that the committee consider a mechanism to fund training, such as through a small allocation of the disaster relief fund, since the bill does not address the serious firefighter training gap that currently exists in Canada. Indeed, equipping and supporting municipal first responders to rail emergencies is of utmost importance, yet this important aspect is not addressed by the bill, and there is no ability to fund training out of this pooled fund. At committee, Mr. Speaker, when my colleague from Brossard-la-Prairie followed up on the recommendation from the fire chiefs to use this relief fund to pay for this training, representatives from Transport Canada admitted that the resources have not been a key focus at this point of this bill. But that those questions will come up as, this is a quote, Mr. Speaker, will come up as they work through the ways in which we can improve the system as a set of jurisdictions and responsible authorities, end quote. And this, Mr. Speaker, is evidence of this government being very casual on this, excessively casual on this issue, this pressing issue of public safety. It reveals, Mr. Speaker, a lack of urgency from this government, and it's a case of the Conservatives making promises but not following up with necessary resources to back those promises up. It was the same lack of urgency exhibited by the minister when, in her recent announcement that Canadians would have to wait fully 10 years for the phase-out of the dangerous rail cars, Mr. Speaker. It's far too long. On the issue of authority to the Minister, Cabinet, and railway safety inspectors, the bill implements a number of changes to the Railway Safety Act that would give more authority to the Minister. As my colleague from York South-Weston has pointed out, in practical terms, these aren't real. But railway safety inspectors would be authorized to order a person or company to take any measure they deem necessary to mitigate a threat to the safety or security of railway operations. And so, Mr. Speaker, providing extra authority to railway safety inspectors is a positive and gets us back to where authority ought to lie for safety with the government and the inspectors they hire, rather than safety management systems. The amendments would also authorize the minister to order a company that's implementing its safety management system in a manner that risks compromising railway safety, and to take necessary corrective measures, Mr. Speaker. But as my colleague has pointed out, it's not clear how the minister will understand or come to know what's in those safety management systems to be able to act on those. But clearly the missed opportunity here, Mr. Speaker, is that of increasing the number of inspectors. Since 2013, Transport Canada has hired just one additional rail safety inspector, even though the amount of oil by rail has more than doubled in the last 2 years. And so while this government has a responsibility to ensure that tragedies like Lac-Mégantic never happen again, we do want to ensure that railways have enough insurance to cover all costs in the event of a disaster. And that's what this bill does, Mr. Speaker. There is more to do, clearly. And one of the things that is missing from the bill, Mr. Speaker, is defining fatigue science in the Railway Safety Act. And it's our worry that its absence, Mr. Speaker, will not ensure that fatigue management is based on science Fatigue has been said to be one of the contributing factors for rail derailments, train derailments. So the fact that the Conservatives refuse to do something about this issue, Mr. Speaker, is quite puzzling and disturbing. On the environmental side, Mr. Speaker, we want to see the polluter pay principle applied to ensure total environmental and cleanup costs of rail accidents are borne by the industry and not downloaded onto taxpayers. But the most important thing, Mr. Speaker, is that we pass this bill before the next election in order to ensure we take at least a small step forward, even though that step be inadequate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.